Hello. In this video, I'm going to share some suggestions of main dishes and desserts that you might try for Valentine's Day or for any time that you want to treat yourself and anyone else you might be cooking for. The recipes that I'll suggest here are all pretty healthy. They tend to be high in fiber and low in saturated fats, and they're also low in added sugars and also low in heavily processed carbs like wheat flour. There are, of course, many other things you can do, and I'll say a thing about that at the end of the video. But through this video, I will share two suggestions for main dishes and two suggestions for desserts that are really flavorful, but also pretty healthy. So for main dishes, one thing that you can do is if you like Tex-Mex and Mexican style food, you can make enchiladas or burritos. And if you're used to making them with meat and cheese, you can still use those ingredients, but you can add some vegetables in order to increase the fiber, and also add beans. Those will increase the fiber as well as other nutrients that are important. Dairy and meat and seafood do have nutrients that we need, but they don't have the full range of nutrients. So adding vegetables to our enchiladas or our burritos can be helpful. So I have a recipe here, which I'm not going to make today, but I have made it in different variations. I made it over the holidays with sweet potatoes and peppers, but you can use any kinds of vegetables that you like. I just recommend that you choose ones that you do like, because if you put things in that you don't care for, it won't be as tasty. And it's also nice if you can find things that are available locally. Right now, you can still get local sweet potatoes. Peppers are not available, so you'd have to get those in the grocery store unless you froze some or canned some from the summertime. But you might be able to find some local broccoli or cauliflower. But you can also use frozen vegetables if you'd prefer. So for this, you roast the vegetables, and depending on how chunky your vegetables are and what it is you're roasting, they'll take a bit more time, but probably minimum 30 minutes, up to 45, depending on what you're roasting. And while those are roasting, you can prepare some other things, like getting the beans ready to go, getting chicken ready to go if you're going to grill some chicken to have with it, and also making an enchilada sauce, which I will share a recipe for in a minute. You can do a lot of things with this, depending on what you've got in your pantry and what you can get at the grocery store. So it's a nice meal to do in the wintertime when you might want to have the oven on for a bit, but also when you're looking for something that's a healthy twist on something you might get in a restaurant. So here is the enchilada sauce, and this is adapted from a book called Love Real Food, which offers vegetarian and vegan recipes. It's available through the Cumberland County Library System if you'd like to borrow it and take a look at it. I also have a dessert recipe that I've adapted from that book that I'll share today. But here is the enchilada sauce. It comes together pretty quickly, so you can make it while the vegetables are roasting. And you might go ahead and get the sauce ready to go. And then if you're going to grill some chicken, grill the chicken next. But basically just get all of the dry ingredients together and stir them in a bowl. And then you will cook those dry spices in some olive oil for several minutes. And then just add some tomato paste and some vegetable broth and a little vinegar to make it a liquid. If you'd like to, you could also add just a little bit of cocoa powder, maybe a pinch of cocoa, but that's not necessary. And then this will be healthy, relatively healthy, and you can put it on top of your enchilada shells once you've filled them with your vegetables, your beans, and maybe some grilled chicken. So this is what the enchilada sauce looks like when it's done. And I can show you what it looks like here as well. So here is the enchilada sauce. It's a fairly thick sauce that you can spoon on top of the tortilla shells once they've been stuffed and folded over in a baking pan. These enchiladas do take a little work. I would say probably an hour to an hour and a half start to finish, depending on how much prep you have to do with your vegetables and whether or not you actually make all of these things. If you grill chicken as well as making the enchilada sauce, then it will take a little time to get everything done because the enchiladas bake for about 20 minutes in the oven once they've been assembled. Another option that I often do for myself is if I have some chili in the freezer, or if I've just recently made a batch of chili, I'll make chili burritos. And if you've already got the chili, that would be a faster, but also a healthy way to go if your chili has beans in it. You could skip adding grilled chicken then if it has meat and you wanted to have some meat, but you've got some ground beef or ground chicken or turkey in your chili or sausage or whatever you put in it. And you could also skip opening a can of beans or cooking some beans if you already have beans in your chili. Just get some vegetables and roast them, and then fill your tortilla shells with the vegetables and the chili and some cheese. Or since enchilada sauce goes on top, and there is a burrito sauce that often goes on top when you get them in a restaurant, you could just put the vegetables inside the shells and then pour the chili and the cheese on top. That's another very easy way to go if you don't have a lot of time and you've got some chili ready, or you wanted to make some chili, and then that's something different you could do with it. They bake for about the same amount of time as the enchiladas, but they would take a little less prep if you already have the chili ready to go. Another option, if you like East Asian style food, this isn't actually a stir fry, strictly speaking, but it is a rice dish that sautés a lot of vegetables. Korean bibimbap is one of my personal favorites, and it's not necessarily super spicy unless you add very hot chilies. It can be a fairly mild but flavorful dish. And this one can take a little time too. It really depends on whether or not you're chopping your vegetables fresh. But what I like about this recipe is that I can do it year round based on whatever I have in my freezer or in my crisper drawer at the moment. So any vegetables you have that you might typically put in a stir fry, you can go ahead and put in your bibimbap. I usually recommend that you put some greens in there, whether it's spinach or kale or chard or bok choy or Chinese cabbage. But beyond that, you can pick out whatever you'd like. You can use broccoli, carrots. You could put celery in it if you'd like. You could also do mung beans or other kinds of bean sprouts that you might be able to get in the grocery store or that you might grow yourself. Any kinds of sprouts would be good as well. Just basically end up with about 6 cups of vegetables total, including leafy greens, and or plus 6 cups of leafy greens, and you've got enough for this amount of bibimbap. You can do whatever protein you like. I'd make it with tofu, but you could also do it with grilled chicken. You could do it with seafood as well. Probably more traditional would be shrimp, which isn't necessarily the healthiest option. So if I'm recommending healthy things, then I would say probably the grilled chicken or the baked tofu. And actually, beef is more traditional too for bibimbap, but again, that's not necessarily the healthiest option since there's a lot of fat in strips of beef. This can take a little time too, as I said, depending on how much of the prep work you do yourself. But if you get everything ready to go, you can quickly cook everything once everything's ready to go into the pan. Once you've got your sauce and your vegetables and your protein ready to go, it really doesn't take much time. So you can work ahead a bit if you'd like and get things ready early, or you can have somebody there to help you, and one person can be grilling some chicken or baking some tofu while another person is getting some vegetables ready to go and getting the sauce ready to go. You can have an all hands on deck situation. You may be able to find the gochujang sauce in an Asian grocery store. If you can't find it, I have a recipe here, and I have another one on the next slide that is actually soy-free for anybody who cannot have soy, because you can find soy-free miso pastes, but it also calls for potentially soy sauce or tamari, and it can be hard to find soy-free miso paste, so I do have another suggestion on the next page if you're trying to avoid that. But basically, you will need some kind of gochujang sauce, either from the store or one that you make, to make the sauce for the bibimbap. And then the rest of the ingredients should be fairly easy to find, even if you don't have all of them in your pantry right now. If you've got all of those things, it comes together really easily. I recommend that you make the sauce and set it aside. It can set at room temperature while you're doing other things. And then what I do is I get the tofu baking, since I make it with tofu, and then I work on the veggies, and I can streamline the process so that it doesn't take too long. And here is the recipe for a soy-free gochujang sauce. You'll need some kind of pepper, and you'll need this for all varieties of the bibimbap sauce. And it really depends on what you have available and what you like. I like spicy things, so I will just go ahead and use red chili flakes because those tend to be from cayenne pepper and are fairly hot. But there is the more traditional Korean, it's called gochugaru. It's a very mild red pepper, and McCormick actually offers it in the grocery stores, so you might be able to find it even just in a basic store like Giant, Wise, or Wegmans. I got mine at one of those here on the West Shore, but I don't remember where exactly at this point. So that's a very mild pepper. It's not even as hot as a jalapeno. It's probably in the area of a banana pepper for its heat. Very mild, but you can also just use chili pepper flakes. If you have cayenne, depending on how much heat you like, both the cayenne and the chili pepper flakes, you could use a little bit less because they are definitely hotter than the traditional Korean pepper. But basically, you mix all of these ingredients together and then just set it aside. And this is what the bibimbap sauce should look like at the end if you put the sesame seeds in it. It's a thin sauce. The gochujang sauce is going to be a bit thicker, but then because with the bibimbap sauce, you add honey and water and rice vinegar, it's going to be a thinner sauce that you will, at the end, just stir into your vegetable and protein. But if you know how to cook sauteed vegetables or how to stir fry vegetables, this is a fairly easy recipe to follow. You just cook the veggies in a little bit of oil in either a deep skillet or in a wok for maybe 5 minutes until they're tender, less if they're already a frozen vegetable that's already been cooked, or if they're easy to cook up like mushrooms, for example, and peppers. But basically cook everything until the vegetables are tender, and then you can add in your chopped greens and just cook those a little bit longer till they reduce and get kind of wilted, and then throw in your protein, maybe some bean sprouts if you're going to throw in any sprouts, any kind of sprout really, it doesn't have to be a bean sprout, and then put in your bibimbap sauce and just mix until everything is thoroughly combined. And then one last thing I would say is, you can't necessarily see from this picture, I have put some fried egg in mine. Traditional in a restaurant, if you've never had Korean bibimbap or in someone's home, is to actually fry eggs over easy or over medium, however you might prefer it. And for every serving of bibimbap, you actually put a fried egg over top. I tend to, because I make a batch to be able to eat for days and days instead of eating fresh each time, I tend to just make some fried egg like I would for fried rice, where I either scramble the egg in a separate pan or I just make a well in the center of the veggie pan and just go ahead and cook the egg there and then mix it in. And that's what I've done here, which is why you can't really see it in my picture of the bibimbap I recently made. But it's a really flavorful dish, and depending on how hot and spicy you like things, it's a little bit sweet, it's a little bit tangy, but it's also a little bit spicy. So it's nice for this time of year when you want to just do something different and get yourself some vegetables, which we all know we need to be eating. It makes the vegetables taste really nice. So if you're open to trying these kinds of Asian style foods, I recommend trying this dish for sure. So then desserts, I have two to recommend today. The first one also comes from that book I mentioned that you can get through the Cumberland County Library System, and it's a chocolate oatmeal. It's called a cookie, but it's a lot like a candy. I will show you what it looks like. So this is what they look like when they're done. They become firm, more like a piece of candy once you put them in the refrigerator to chill. These cookies or candies are fairly healthy. There's no dairy in it, so it's no saturated fat, some unsaturated fat from the peanut butter, or if you wanted to, you could use another nut butter or a seed butter if you can't have nuts. And there's a little bit of sugar because you do melt some chocolate chips, but you could get an organic variety of chocolate and get a darker chocolate if you prefer. That'll reduce the sugar as well as other ingredients that aren't as healthy for you, especially hydrogenated oils and other additives that you might find in some of the major brands of chocolate chips. And there's a little bit of plant oil in it, but if you do a vegetable oil like canola or sunflower oil, you're going to have one of the lower unsaturated fat oils. And then the oats help to provide some fiber, and if you want, you can put some chopped nuts in, which are also healthy, but you could just increase the oats, which will give you even more fiber. And you basically just melt the chocolate chips together with the peanut butter and the maple syrup and the oil, and then add in the salt and the cinnamon. And once everything is melted and evenly mixed, you remove it from the heat and put in the vanilla, and then stir in the oats and maybe the nuts, and then just shape them into these balls and put them probably on some parchment or some wax paper, either on a baking sheet or in a large container that you can line them up in a single layer, and refrigerate them for at least an hour or two. Or you can just keep them for later. They'll keep in the fridge for a week or two. I made some of these over the holidays and they kept for several weeks, or you can freeze them too and defrost them for later. But they taste really decadent, but in the scheme of things, they're definitely a relatively healthy decadent chocolate dessert. So they're worth trying if you like chocolate and can eat it. And you can do peanut butter or some other nut butter or seed butter. So here was what they looked like when I was putting them on some parchment to put them in the fridge to chill for a bit when they weren't quite firm. One thing I would say is you might need to use your fingers to make sure that they stick together, because they can be a little bit crumbly sometimes when they're not chilled. So you might need to just press them together a bit with your hands to make sure that you don't lose too much of the cookie batter. And then an even healthier dessert, especially if you're thinking you might like to do an East Asian dinner with the bibimbap, but if you're also just looking for some fruit to eat instead of something decadent like the chocolate oatmeal cookies, you can do sauteed pineapple. and you can slice it or you can cube it. More traditional is probably to slice it. And you can probably even find, I've seen sliced fresh pineapple in the deli section at the grocery stores. So you might be able to get some of that. I got a whole pineapple and cut it up because it's a little cheaper that way and I can get more out of it and just eat some. But you basically just heat a little bit of oil in a skillet, and for every 1.5 cups of cubed pineapple, which is about 1/2 pound, and that equaled for me about 5 1/2-inch slices of pineapple. You just saute those in oil, and then after they've sauteed on each side for 2 to 3 minutes, you will throw in some cinnamon or ginger or another spice if you prefer. You can put in some brown sugar if you'd like. I avoided it because I didn't really want the extra sugar. And then some lemon or lime juice. And then if you want, you can serve it topped with toasted coconut. So this is what the pineapple slices look like. And I had 5 of these that equaled about 1/2 pound for the amount of the recipe or that is listed here. And they're about 1/2 inch thick. And this is what they look like once they're done. So you can play around with that and do different things. The sweetness of the pineapple and the tartness of the pineapple balances well already. And then the cinnamon and the ginger help to the flavor of either one of those or both. I did both. I did a 1/4 teaspoon of both of those for a full 1/2 teaspoon of spices, but you could do just one or the other, or you can combine it or try something else. And the spices are enhanced by the tartness of the pineapple itself as well as by the sweetness of it. But then if you add a little brown sugar and a little bit of lime or lemon juice, it's going to enhance it a bit more. I didn't bother with any sugar. I did add some lime juice because I served it with toasted coconut, which makes it sweeter too. But you could skip the coconut if you want. It does have some saturated fats in it, and it also has some nutrients too. So, if you can get plain coconut, not the ones that have extra things added like sugars, but just a plain shredded coconut, then that's a fairly healthy, light thing to add for a not so decadent and rich and unhealthy dessert option. And you could do that with the enchiladas or the bibimbap or with something else that you want to eat. So this is what it looked like in the pan and when it first came out of the pan before I put some toasted coconut on to try it. So I have 2 recommended menus, but you can play around and find other things. You could do Korean bibimbap, which is served with rice. And then one possibility is if you don't feel like even doing a full dessert, when I would eat dinners hosted by my Korean friends, when we were still getting together and they hadn't moved back to Korea, they would often just serve fresh sliced fruit. So after we'd had our meal, they would get out some apples, some pears, some oranges, and slice them up on a plate for us to eat while we drank some tea. So you could do that instead if you want to be super healthy, or you could do the sauteed fresh pineapple, or you can be decadent and do the chocolate oatmeal cookies. And then I recommend as another possible menu, if you don't want to do the bibimbap, you could do burritos or enchiladas and then do chocolate oatmeal cookies, or you could do the sauteed pineapple. And if you did, you might try it with chili powder instead. That would also help to bring some flavors out, and it would complement the enchiladas or burritos well. So there are many other things you can do. You can look around and explore other ideas. I did mention that book, Love Real Food, which is available, but there are many other options out there. Look for things in cuisines that you like, and just follow those basic principles that more vegetables is better than less. Dishes with beans, lentils, and peas add fiber and other nutrients. dishes that have lean cuts of meat or healthy seafoods like salmon are better. And then dishes that call for tomato sauces instead of creamy sauces, right? If you want to have pasta, for example, you might choose a tomato-based sauce instead of a creamy sauce if you're trying to be healthier right now. But you can do an Alfredo and just have a lot of vegetables. And then also finding ways to use a lower amount of salt and keep the sodium low. And then for desserts, watch out for the sweeteners that are added and watch out for the dairy because that adds saturated fat and calories. And then also there's processed grains. Less of the processed grains like wheat flour and oat flour is better. That's why neither of these recipes that I recommend for desserts have any kind of flour in them, which also helps to make them healthier. They have oats instead of oat flour or wheat flour. So I hope that there have been some ideas here that you'll find useful and you'll enjoy. And I will see you next time for the next video.